Medics for Paranormal, PPF Investigations, and the Unseen Paranormal Podcast present the Tennessee Haunts and Legends Expo, coming October 21st, 2023 to the Fairgrounds, Nashville, in Nashville, Tennessee, featuring over 80 vendors, paranormal teams, and historic locations, as well as a full schedule of speakers with topics including Bigfoot, the Bell Witch, paranormal investigations, and more. A majority of the proceeds will benefit a local historic location and a local charity. For more information and how to be a vendor, please visit tnhauntsandlegendsexpo.com. Tickets on sale soon.
Welcome everyone to Life Beyond 6 Feet. I'm Damien from RKB Paranormal, and this week I'm very excited about our guest. I have Mr. Allen Sircy with us. He's an investigator and an author. Allen, welcome to Life Beyond 6 Feet, man.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Absolutely. Now, for those that don't know, and Allen, I don't even know if you remember, but me and you met about 2 years ago at a event in Rosemont.
Trousdale. Was it Rosemont? No, it was Trousdale.
It was Rosemont.
Okay.
I think you were there with Eric and Lee and all them, and yeah, I don't think we really got to chat much because that was my first event, so I was a little nervous to be around a bunch of people. So I brought my oldest stepson because he had been wanting to go investigating with me. So I seen that one and I took him to that one, and he really enjoyed it. So, but yeah, you mentioned Trousdale. I think that was the next time I actually kind of got to chat with you for a few minutes. I helped out with an event there. Had no clue what I was doing. Had no clue about the location, but I was happy to help you guys. So,
hey man, I'm still just making it up as I go too. So it is what it is.
I hear you. So we're just gonna kind of jump right into this thing. When is your fascination with the paranormal kind of begin?
Oh man, as a kid, I always thought it was kind of neat and all. I guess it really started. I guess was it 2004, 2005. My great grandparents bought 2 acres behind Travelers Rest in Nashville and built a house back there in the 50s. Well, my great grandfather passed away, I think in 97, 98, whatever it was. And in '05, they put my great grandmother in a nursing home. But because the house was tied up in the state, insurance would not cover it if someone wasn't living there. So my uncle called and said, "Hey, would you mind coming living at your grandmother's house? It's probably gonna be for a few months. Would you mind helping us out?" And I was in an apartment at the time, so I didn't mind. I figured I'd be there 6 months or so, but
right.
I was there 10 years.
Oh wow.
And Travelers Rest, if you're unfamiliar with that land, in the 1300, it was a Mississippi Indian village. Well, in the 1800s, John Overton, he was Andrew Jackson's best friend, campaign manager, advisor. Him, Winchester, and Jackson founded the city of Memphis together. Overton was a very prominent guy. He's also a judge in Nashville. But he bought that land, and when he bought it, he started building his house, and he dug up 3 stonebox Indian graves to build his house.
Oh, wow.
So already he's kind of on the 8 ball as far as just the bad juju on the land.
Right.
So I moved in '05, and I'm there for a little while. And the first night I'm there, there's a trash can in the dining room, the kitchen, and it moved 8 feet in the middle of the night. I woke up and I looked in the middle of the floor and I thought, well, that wasn't there the night before. That's kind of weird. Well, I had a light in the den, it kept turning itself off and on. The TVs, I wake up in the morning, they'd be on. Just weird things kept happening. So one day I hopped the fence and walked over to Travelers Rest, the mansion. And I said, "Hey, I live right over here. Just weird things are happening. Is this place haunted?" "Oh no, I can assure you, there's no ghost here. Here it's about the Mississippi Indian village and the Overton family. There's no ghost." Okay, so I'm walking back to the car and I see this lady getting out of her car and she's wearing this costume. So I said, "Ma'am, I live right over here. Is this place haunted?" She goes, "Oh, honey, there's so many ghosts here. I can't talk to you about it." I said, "Okay, I get it." So flash forward a few years, my wife and I are in Savannah, Georgia. I'm sure you've been down there. There's so much history. You know, Georgia was a colony, and they fought a lot of the revolution there in Savannah, or some of the revolution in Savannah. So I didn't want to go. I wanted to go to the beach. I wanted to go somewhere else. And I get down there, and I just fell in love with the history and how it's tied into the paranormal and all the hauntings and stuff. And so we're down there. My wife's, you take a ghost tour, and they charge like 25, $30, and you go just a handful of places. Some of them are fun. Some of them's kind of a ripoff. So my wife said, someone should make an app for $2, has all the haunted places in them. So I was like, So I went and bought a Mac and I taught myself how to code and did a bunch of research on Savannah. And after about 6 months, I had an app. It's called the Savannah Ghost Map. And I had all the haunted places logged and the history. And then I got bored that summer and made one for Nashville. And then I did Louisville and Boston, Salem, New Orleans, St. Augustine. I just rambled off all these maps.
Oh wow.
A lot of traveling, a lot of investigating and digging, and yeah, and then it's just wild, and it kind of led me into the books. The apps, I'm not sure you're familiar with apps. I mean, I didn't go to school for any of this. I'm kind of just self-taught.
Right.
But Apple and Google, they want you to update them like several times a year, and it gets
Hmm.
very, very tedious. And when you're coding, like one semicolon can ruin the whole thing, and just 12 hours of work is down the drain.
Right.
So after just updating these apps off and on for a couple of years, I just let them go, and I just concentrated fully on books. And I
Right.
did the first one, and my first book was about MMA. My previous life, I used to manage some fighters, and I was an official, and had a lot of crazy stories from the road. But
Oh wow.
after that, I started writing about the hauntings and history around here in Middle Tennessee.
Right. Now, before we get into the books and stuff, what's some like investigations you may have done that kind of got you more interested and say, maybe I want to write some books one day about this stuff?
I mean, with Sorrel Weed House in Savannah, that was a cool place. We took a tour down there, and you had a little EMF meter, and I walk over in the middle of the room. It got kind of cold, and the meter spikes to red, and I turn over to the tour guide. I was like, "Hey, is this normal?" She's like, "Oh, be real still." And like they went back to green, and then somebody else in the other corner room, theirs went to red. So I guess something was down there with us. But one of the weird things that happened, the first really, I mean, aside from living over behind Traveler's Rest, it was in Gallatin working on the Gallatin book, Ghost of Gallatin in 2019, 2018 is when I wrote it. I was visiting Rosemont, and I was on the front step. I took the tour, and when I took the tour, I recorded the conversation on my iPhone with the director Eli.
Hmm.
Take notes and everything, get the history of the house. And as we're talking, we find out that we're related. My last name is Sircy. His mother's maiden name is Sircy. So we're distant cousins down the road. I think he found out that his grandfather and my grandfather were first or second cousins, something along those
Oh
lines.
wow.
So I'm telling the story. I said, hey, well, I just had a little boy just a few months ago. And, I'm the last on my grandfather's side with the name. So my name carries on through my little boy. And I get home at night, I'm working on the book and I'm playing back the conversation. And you hear me say, the name carries on through my little boy. And in the background, you hear this woman say, oh, good.
Oh
And
wow.
like, I said it to Eli, and he wrote me back. He said, man, the hairs in the back of my neck are standing up right now. It's just, because it was just he and I on the front steps. I'm leaving. We're just making small talk.
Right.
And that lady's voice is there saying, oh, good. That was probably the first really big wow moment that I had in the paranormal.
Right. So now, when did you kind of decide to start writing all these different books? Because by my account, like, you have what, about eight or nine actually out right now, right?
Yeah, there's more on the way. Well, I don't know. It's just when I did the Gallatin book, I did it just kind of for fun. I thought if I make some money, that's great. But it's just the city of Gallatin is just amazing history up here. Um, Everything's haunted. So I did Gallatin, and it did really, really well. It surprised any expectations that I had. So I used to work in Murfreesboro years ago, and I used to know a lady that lived on Main Street, one of those houses on East Main, and she always talked about how there was a guy in a fedora in her attic.
Hmm.
So after I finished the Gallatin book, I went to Murfreesboro, started poking around. In Murfreesboro, it's the only city in the country that had three Civil War battles.
Oh wow.
You had the Battlestones River is the big one. It was 1863 on New Year's Eve. You had the Battle of the Cedars, which was the day before the Battle of Nashville. And then you had when Forrest stormed the square in 1862. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, but when the Union when Fort Donelson, Fort Henry fell, the Union came into Nashville, took the city, the mayor surrendered without a fight. They secured Nashville. They branched out. They took Murfreesboro, Gallatin, Springfield, Franklin, anywhere that had waterways and railroad hubs. They locked them down because the goal was to get into Georgia, South Carolina. They were
Hmm.
trying to, Sherman's March. Well, they took took Nashville, went to Murfreesboro. When they got to Murfreesboro, they went to Manchester, which is, I guess maybe 15, 20 miles to the east. They took 100 men prisoners as a show of force and marched them back to Murfreesboro and threw them in jail. So what happened was the ladies of the town got word of Forrest, Nathan Bedford Forrest, his cavalry. And so Forrest and his men stormed the square of Murfreesboro. And that day, Forrest is outnumbered probably 3, 4, 5 to 1. But he used the buildings to camouflage his numbers and had tricked the Union thinking they were surrendered. So
Hmm.
they had a big shootout on East Main Street over the Oakland's mansion. But on the square, the Union general looks out and he's thinking, I'm done. I'm surrounded. I give up. But Forrest just tricked them.
Right.
So, but while this is going on, those 100 men that were thrown into the jail, the Union sets it on fire. So Forrest and his men go over and rescue the guys from the burning jail and freeze them. So it's like
Huh.
it's weird. Like you hear all these horrible things about Forrest, and a lot of them are rightfully so.
Right.
But there's people in Manchester that think Forrest is a great man because he saved their ancestors,
Mm.
from burning jail. So it's history. So it's not all black and white like you hear in the history books. But
Right.
yeah, those three battles of Murfreesboro and it's like Gallatin. There's no fire codes, or there's hardly any fire codes in the 19th century.
Hmm.
I think in Nashville, I think it was the late 1850s, they implemented that you can no longer build wooden structures. Everything before that's made of wood, and everything just keeps burning down.
Right.
So it happened in Gallatin, Murfreesboro, Franklin, Nashville, New Orleans, Chicago. I mean, it was a problem
Hmm.
everywhere, these wooden buildings. So, yeah, Murfreesboro is super haunted. I mean, three Civil War battles, the fires, these, it's just nuts. But yeah, Murfreesboro. Then I went on to Franklin. I used to work in Franklin. Um, I used to work in a grocery store. And one day this girl calls me and she said, "Hey, I can't come in today." I said, "Well, are you sick? What's going on?" She's like, "No, we just saw a soldier walk through our kitchen. I'm taking the day off."
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
What do
that's
you say? It's like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
right.
But they fought the Battle of Franklin a mile from the square, and then when it was over, both armies came to the town to the square, and every building was a hospital. I
Hmm.
mean, every business, every house, every structure was occupied. The Union fell back to Nashville, but for the longest time, there were guys being treated there. A lot of them died.
Right.
And in Franklin, the coolest story I found when I was in Franklin, ghost stories great. But when you can get a Frankenstein story, that's just icing on the cake. So in Franklin, right there where the courthouse is, in the 1830s, there's a doctor from Pennsylvania named Dr. Ferdinand Stith. And he opened up a practice there on the square where the courthouse is. Well, in 1830, Mary Shelley published Frankenstein, the first
Hmm.
science fiction novel. And back then, all these crackpot doctors and scientists wanted to see, hey, can I can I do this too?
Right.
So Dr. Stith, he was kind of a quirky guy, and he made a deal with this guy who was going to be hanged out there on Columbia Pike, where the police station is now. And when he was executed, he claimed his body, brought it back to his office there where the courthouse is, and he zapped it with electricity with a galvanized battery. And his body shot up, his eyes open, he kind of twitched, and he fell back once the battery died.
Oh,
But it's just galvanism was a thing back then. It kind of gets
right.
glossed over in the history books.
Right. And see, that's one thing that's kind of interesting about your books. They're not just ghost stories. It tells a lot of the history of these places too. And so you kind of get a two for one deal if you're into both of those type of things. Now, how long does it generally take you to write, just say one book? Like how much research and from start to finish, how long does it normally take to write a good book?
That's all I've been doing this afternoon. And it's a weird question because I've got a back burner a mile long. Like I've got stuff I've been dabbling with since 2018 that like last year I put out 5 books, but I just didn't write them all at one time. I've been, 30 pages here and I'll put it on the back burner for 6 months and come back to it.
Right.
It's just, I mean, if I have enough time to write, I could churn out probably 5, 6 books a year. It's just finding free time with a child and,
Right.
a real job. It's hard to do that. But yeah, research, you spend more time researching than you do writing. I think
Right.
that's the fun part for me. Just when I started doing this, I kept asking myself, why is it haunted? It's like I don't want to write a ghost story. I want to be able to explain why it's haunted. That's what I enjoy
Right.
doing. I want
Right.
to tie the history to the hauntings. There's a place up here in Gallatin. I remember I was talking to this gentleman who owned the building, and he was saying that, yeah, there's a psychic who came to my building. She'd heard it was haunted, and she wanted to check it out. So she walked in, she opened the door, she walked around the corner, she stuck her hand on the to walk up the stairs on the banister there, and then she fell back. She said, "I can't feel my right arm. I've got a splitting headache." So he told me that story, and I went to the archives and started digging. Turns out the guy who owned that building, he was a Confederate soldier, lost his right arm, and suffered a head wound in the war.
Oh
So
wow.
when you can, that's what I like to do. If you can tie it
Right.
together, I want to know why it's haunted.
Right. Now, when you're doing your research, do you actually go to these buildings and talk with the people that own them, or you just go to like the archives? Like, how do you do all your research?
All the above, man. Newspapers.com. Just go in there and dig in. I was somewhere, was I somewhere last year researching one of the books, and I walked in. I said, "Hey, I just got a weird question. Is this place haunted?" He's like, "Yeah, how did you know?" I was like, "Well, I've read there was a fire here 150 years ago." So it's just
Right.
kind of um, in the Franklin book. One of the coolest things that's happened to me is, I'm not a super duper paranormal investigator. I'm an amateur guy. I just kind
Right.
of go, I got a digital recorder with EMF, and I'll use the apps on the iPad, but I'm not really convinced they're 100%. But you never know. Sometimes they do make some weird things happen.
Right.
Um, but we were in Franklin at the end of the square. If you know where the White Building is, are you familiar with downtown Franklin?
Yeah. Yeah. My
You,
wife
you know
loves
where
Franklin. Yeah.
you know where Starbucks is on the corner.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, back in the 1860s, that was there's a big mansion there. There's a prominent businessman who owned a large house. Well, the night of the Battle of Franklin, that became a hospital. So, flash forward, I think it was early 20th century, 1910. They built it's called the White Building. And Doctor built this big building on the corner, on the end of the square there for his practice. Well, he had a patient came in with a real contagious disease and gave it to him, and he died.
Oh.
So, since then, they split the building up into three different buildings, and now I think there's a Starbucks in the corner, there's a mattress store in the middle, there's an eye doctor in the middle and a mattress store on the other end. So when I was writing the book, I was talking to all these business people, all the people who work in these buildings, and Starbucks said, "Yeah, there's a drummer boy in our basement." The mattress store in the middle, no, the eye doctor in the middle said, "There's a bugler in our basement,"
Hmm.
and the guy in the mattress store on the end said, "Well, there's something in the basement. We don't know what it is." So I made arrangements with the lady who owned the eye doctor building, and I got Mark Walsh from Rutherford County Paranormal to come down, and he's got a lot of equipment.
Right.
And we're down there in the basement, and we're getting nothing. We're just twiddling our thumbs. So I pull up my phone on YouTube and I play the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is what the Union soldiers would have marched to at some point. I play that, everything goes nuts. The lights are flashing and bells are going ringing and everything's going off. So we go upstairs to the exam room where the doctor has heard somebody whispering in his ear, and it's the same thing. We're getting nothing. I play the Battle Hymn of the Republic. He goes nuts. So the lady who works there, she gets bored. She goes, "What's your name?" And all of a sudden, Mark has a geoport, which is kind of like was it a ghost box, but it's like a
Right.
lot bigger, a lot more elaborate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And out of that geoport, it goes Drake. And we're sitting there, and uh, she gets bored, and she goes, "Did you say Blake or Drake?" And he goes, "Drake," second time.
Mm.
So then she goes, "Did you say Drake?" And he goes, "Yes." So
Wow.
we have three confirmations named Drake is who is there, supposedly. So I go home. I went to the archive a day or two later. Thomas Jefferson Drake was a drummer of the 10th Ohio. He died in the Battle of Franklin. And
Mm.
I can't tell you 100% that he died in that old house that was there before the White Building,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of, me playing music and everything going nuts.
Right.
Maybe Thomas Jefferson Drake was the one who died in that building, and now he's there in the White Building.
That could be. I mean, that's almost too many coincidences for it to just
Yeah,
so that's really cool. And yeah, my wife loves Franklin. We hit up downtown Franklin probably about once a month it seems like, and just walking the streets, it has that feeling to it. And like if
yeah,
you didn't know any of the history, you would just be looking around like there's something going on with this town. And I'm sure that's how it is like in Murfreesboro and stuff like that too. So
yeah.
um so do you like self-publish your books, or you actually like publish through a company? How do you publish your books?
Well, yeah, I self-published through KDP and also Ingram. I've been approached by other outlets and publishers, but I kind of like doing it myself, kind of just being hands-on and kind of
Right.
controlling everything. And it's good in some aspects and bad in some aspects, but it just kind of gives me total control of what I want to do.
Right. Now, obviously, you live here in the South. So why did you decide to write your books just about the South? Have you decided, I grew up here. I love the South, or do you have plans to eventually expand farther out? Like, why
Well,
just the
I
South?
told you earlier, I'm kind of making it up as I go.
Right.
Yeah, my wife and I started a podcast called Southern Ghost Stories. It just because that was the book we are doing. It's kind of, I don't know. In 2019, I was just making it up and we'll be
Right.
Southern Ghost Stories. And so, yeah, and it just kind of fit with everything. And then I kind of branched out. I've done a Philadelphia book, I've done a Louisville book, and I'm kind of pushing the boundaries of Southern. And there's some projects in the work, and I'm thinking about doing something a little bit different with a different name where I can branch out because I have pigeonholed myself, and
Right.
that's something I've really been wrestling with because you can't do a book about San Francisco or
Right.
Denver, or, if you're Southern Ghost Stories.
Right. And so by my accounts, if I found them all, you've done downtown Nashville, Franklin, two books on Gallatin. You've done one called Haunted Hotels. You've done Murfreesboro, South Nashville, Opryland, Louisville, and Philadelphia.
Yes, sir.
I think the one that fascinates me the most is Opryland.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're from Nashville, you love Opryland. If you
Right,
grew up around
right.
here during that time, I mean, yeah, as a kid, I spent all my summers in Opryland, the theme
Mm-hmm.
park.
Me too.
Yeah, and that was like the greatest place in the world. And then in the '90s, they tore it down and built that mall.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start writing these books, like I told you, I got a back burner mile long. When you start writing these books, people come up to you at book signings or events, wherever I am, like, hey, I used to work here, I worked in this building, or I grew up here. And you just get stories. And I just started cataloging them all.
Right.
And in the '90s, I think it was '95, '96, I worked at the Opryland Hotel. And I kept hearing a story about the old lady. And I was a teenager. I didn't really think a lot of it, but I hear people, oh yeah, so and so saw the old lady, or hey, have you seen the old lady? And I didn't really think much of it, know what it was. Well, once started writing these books, I come to find out Opryland Hotel, Opryland theme park, it's all super, super haunted. Kind of like Traveler's Rest. It was a big Indian village. It
Hmm.
was owned by the McGavick family, at McGavick High School.
Mm-hmm.
I read something in the archives where they were paving or digging out a road, and they turned up all these graves from the Native Americans that were there before them. So Mary Louise McGavick, she was the last of the McGavicks. Had no children. She was the last heir. So when she died, this huge plantation along the bottoms of the Cumberland River in Nashville, she wanted it given to her church for either an orphanage or a hospital. So her body wasn't cold, and they sold it to WSN to build a theme park.
Hmm.
So as soon as they get this theme park up and running, they start seeing this old lady walking around in the gazebos and walking around
Right.
the park. I had someone tell me that her coworker was cleaning up one night, and this old woman just kind of appeared in front of him. There she is, and she says, "Excuse me, what year is it?" And he's trying to think of something smart to say to her, and then boom, she's just gone.
Oh man.
So just weird stuff like that happened. Over in the hotel, it's the same thing. The original wing of the hotel is called the Magnolia Wing, or whatever they call it. That was the first part that was expanded immensely since then. But the original part of the hotel, they see her in the hotel.
Huh.
Uh, Over there in the mall, weird things happen in the mall now. Over there, Music Valley Drive, the big touristy stuff, all kinds of stuff happens over there. Ernest Tubb, he was the very first recording star, like for any genre to travel the country. His tour bus is they built the shopping center around his tour bus. It was Ernest Tubb Record Shop. Well, the business went under, but his bus is still there. I think it's been in several different boutiques, but I talked to people who worked in those buildings and they'll hear people calling their name from the bus.
Oh
So that
wow.
whole area is just super, super haunted.
Right. I run my stepfather, he said he worked at Opryland when he was a teenager, and he said I don't think he ever experienced anything, but he heard several different stories, when he worked there about stuff that other people experienced. And you can throw the Grand Ole Opry in there too, because it's right
Yeah.
there amidst all that. And I've heard a lot of stories about that place. So
Yeah, they say that Roy Acuff, because he built him a house, they say that he's over there is one of the stories.
right.
Yeah, I talked to the security guard. He told me that he was there one night. I think the power went out. I can't remember the story. It's been several years, but he's in there and it's dark and he hears these heavy boots walk across the Opry stage. And then he goes up there and looks around. There's nobody around him.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
See, like the Opry, Grand Ole Opry, that's a place like I would like to investigate if I was ever able to get in there to actually do that. That would be a place in like the Opryland Hotel. Just just iconic places like that would just be amazing just to spend a few hours in there with just a handful of people. That would be amazing to do that
Well,
stuff.
something I uncovered up in the hotel, there was a murder suicide there. There was a guy, they're from Kentucky,
Hmm.
and they were having some marital issues, and there was a big spat, big fight, and he threw his wife over the balcony of the hotel late one night. She grabbed him, and he fell over too. So that I was talking to an empath, and she was telling me there was something kind of there tied to that as well.
Oh wow, that's that's insane. Now, yeah, a minute ago you mentioned you know, a walk-in ghost store down in Savannah. Didn't you used to do a walk-in tour like in Franklin?
Well, yeah, I do one in Gallatin.
Gallatin, okay.
Yeah, I've done it off and on for 2019. I did 2019 when the book came out. I did a couple for charity, did for raise money for some nonprofits down there. It was something kind of for fun. I didn't really think it was that big a deal. There was any money. I just kind of did it for fun, and I wanted to help some people who would help me.
Right.
Well, when I did the Franklin book, I worked a lot with Franklin on foot, helping them with some tours and kind of like a special guest. And I realized, like, man, there's just a lot of money leaving on the table not doing these tours.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of incorporated things I learned in Franklin and kind of took Gallatin and just made it my own. And
Right.
I tell stories, show pictures, tell the history. There's a lot of true crime. There's a story that there's stories in Gallatin that I can't tell you because it's still when I wrote the book in 2019, there's one story I wrote. I wrote the first story I uncovered. I had to put in the book. There's a reason why I wrote the book, but I found I couldn't tell it.
Oh,
There's a girl that was murdered. Her mother is now 99. Her sister's in their 70s. And when I was talking to some of the family, they're like, "You can't do this. It's still too fresh." So there's a lot of stories I haven't told, and I'll tell a few of those on the tour. But yeah, there's so many stories in Gallatin. I enjoy telling them, and I have pictures and videos. I got videos that make you scratch your head, things we captured on the tour.
oh man, that's crazy. And then speaking of Gallatin, I think when we did that, attended that event at Rosemont, I think the most time I spent with you was actually across the road at that antique store, the Pickle Treats and Antique Spooky Pickle store. Now,
Yeah.
what's the story behind this place?
Yeah, if you're ever in town, go see my friend Shauna. She runs Pickle Treats and Antiques, aka the Spooky Pickle. It's across the street from Rosemont. And usually, if I do something at Rosemont, there's a lot of people over there. And I feel like I'm in the way, and I'd rather go hang out and just kind of talk to Shauna and just be a fly on the wall over there at Pickle Treats. Well, it when Judge Gill to go to Rosemont, his daughter got married. He gave her that lot across the street and built her a big house.
Hmm.
Eventually, it was torn down. They built this little boutique over there, and just weird things happen all the time in there. Weird things get moved around. Um, the they had a dollhouse and furniture would get moved. One night, I'm not sure if you were there, but at Rosemont, they were doing a joint investigation, Pickle Treats, and I was across the street with Shauna. Well, one of the investigators just left early or something. So I just took charge. I took a tour of the Pickle Treats, and all I had was my EMF detector, EMF meter. So I'm like, what can I do? So I went over in the corner where some stuff usually gets moved around, and it was me. There was a kid, maybe he was 12 or 13, and there were these four women in their 30s, and they were attractive ladies. So we're in there, and I said, "Hey, does anybody want to communicate with us?" And I had my EMF meter, and I passed it around. So when I had it, it was on green. I gave it to the first pretty lady, turned red. She gave it to her friend, it was still red. I said, "Let me see that." I take it back, and back to green. I gave it to the third girl, spiked to red. I took it back, green. Gave it to the fourth girl, it was red. She gave it to the little boy, turned green. So
Mm,
they say the spirit's name is James, and he's definitely a ladies'
right. That's
man.
I know when we were over there, that was the corner we were in because it was around one of the doll houses, and I mean that may have been my stepson over there. I can't remember exactly what all was happening, but I do remember EMF detector being involved, and so yeah, and he's talked about Rosemont and that antique store. He talked about it for months after we left there. He absolutely loved Rosemont, and my wife wants to eventually go. We've been during the day, and she wants to go back again and check it out at night, which I do too. So
See, my
yeah.
favorite place is Trousdale Place, and we talked about it earlier.
Mhm.
That house, it sat empty for years. It was owned by the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution. And when I wrote the book in 2019, the first book in 2019, I chased a lady who oversaw the house for almost a year, and I couldn't ever catch her. She came down once a year. She was here for a few days at Christmas time to open the house for the holidays. Then she went back home to East Tennessee or South Carolina, wherever it was she lived. So the lady, a new leadership is taking place in the house, and they contact me, say, "Hey, weird things are happening. We'd like to get you involved." So the very first open house we go to, a friend of mine, she's an empath, and she's very good. When I wrote the first book, I met her, and she was just telling me stuff that only I knew from writing the book. Well, the open house invited her. I wanted her to come see what she could pick up. Well, we open the door. I greet him. She walks in, and she brought a friend of hers who's also an empath, but she's from the Dominican Republic.
Mm.
Her friend from the Dominican walks in, steps 1 foot inside the house, and just falls over in a heap. So I rush over. "Hey, are you okay? Let me get you some water." She finally gets her bearings. As we're trying to get her back to her feet, my empath friend is staring at this corner of the wall, and she's like, "He's so sorry. He's so sorry. He didn't mean to do that. He wants you to know he's very sorry, and he would never hurt anybody." Turns out what she said was when the lady from the Dominican stepped into the door, the man in the house, he came to see who she was. because people from Dominican have a very unique skin complexion. It's not black, it's not white, it's just different.
Hmm.
And he wasn't, I guess, not familiar with that. So he went to see who she was and greet her. And I guess he passed through her and just dropped her.
Mm.
So after that, she was fine. But that's one of the weirdest things that's ever happened. And I guess a few months after that, I had people took a picture and you see a man's face kind of in the corner of the window.
Oh wow.
I did a tour there. The main ghost story is Mary. She's the governor. She's Governor Trousdale. The house belonged to the former governor of Tennessee, William Trousdale. Well, in that house, his son died and his granddaughter died, and they died with like a few days of each other. Well, Mary, she was like 18 when she died upstairs. So we tell the story about Mary, and when I do the tours, I tell everybody, "Hey, take pictures. You might get something." Because usually you do. It's nuts. Stuff happens there. So we're walking up there, and this guy took a picture. You kind of see the light is on in Mary's room, right there by the window. Walk up to the stairs and start talking. It goes off.
Hmm.
So in the night, I text the lady who runs the house. I said, "Hey, this happened." She goes, "That's impossible." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I lamp there by the window. It's not plugged into the wall.
Oh
So next
wow.
time I was in there, I went and took a picture of it. And if it would have been the overhead lights, all lights would have been on, attached to the same switch.
Right.
So yeah, it's just nuts.
That's insane. And like I said, when I went to Trousdale to help you guys out, like I don't think I'd even heard of the building because I was still fairly new in the and doing a lot of this stuff. Like maybe I'd heard of it, but like I didn't know anything. So I was actually in the building, the other building, helping out, and
In the
it was
museum,
yeah, where they had those creepy mannequins upstairs, the one that
were you
supposedly
there when
moved.
that girl got hit?
I don't know, maybe.
Okay, like you know the story. Um, that night there was a young lady. She was an intern at Trailsdale Place, and she made the remark to her friend, "Hey, if something's here, it's gonna have to beat me upside the head to get my attention."
Mm.
Well, he didn't beat her upside the head. We're up at Trailsdale Place up by the mannequin that falls over and supposedly moves on its own. And as we're up there talking, you hear this girl scream. And we turn the lights on. There's a handprint on her arm. Something smacked her on the arm. My buddy was standing right behind her. And I said, "Man, what happened?" He said, "Alan, I was right behind her and I didn't see a thing." So I took a picture of her arm and you can see like it's a large handprint on her arm or something just popped her.
Wow. I mean, she did kind of, I guess, ask him to do that. So, and I know you said you got a few new books coming out. I know I've seen you post a couple little teasers. You got one, what is it, Brentwood and one in Hendersonville, right?
Well, when I started Nashville, was it? I started a long time ago, but I guess it was last January. I sitting on my desk, and I'm like, I've got 700 pages. This is too big. No one's going to read a book this big. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? So I was laying in bed one night. And I thought, okay, I'm going to split it up: downtown, north, south, east, and west, because I got plenty of material.
Hmm.
So I dropped South Nashville last summer, and I'm going to drop West Nashville this summer. Um, South Nashville, because I lived in South Nashville, that's where I grew up. That's where Creve Hall, Travelers Rest is. Lindsley Hall, another Frankenstein story in South Nashville. West Nashville, there's some good stuff in West Nashville. Indian attacks. You got the Tony Alamo story. You know Tony Alamo?
Mm-mm.
Okay. When I was a kid growing up, there's a guy named Tony Alamo. He was a washed out country singer. He grew up, I think, in St. Louis, moved to California to be a country singer, realized he wasn't going to make it as a singer, so he became a manager. Started managing guys, taking their money, embezzling money from them. He meets this girl who is also a washed up singer named Susan. They get married. They wash out of California, move to Arkansas. They start this compound. They start bringing in people who are just wayward souls. So it's a cult, basically, what it is. So they move from Arkansas. Well, while they're in Arkansas, the lady dies. Susan dies. And he made his believers pray over her body for like 3 or 4 days. Like her rotting corpse is in front of them.
Mm.
He's making people pray in front of her, say she's going to rise from the dead. Spoiler alert, she doesn't. Well,
Right.
eventually he builds this real big tomb for her right by the swimming pool in the backyard. Eventually, he owes a lot of money to the government. They raid his compound, take a bunch of possessions to try to recoup the money he owes them. But they discover that Susan's tomb has been destroyed and the body is gone. So no one knows where it is. During this time, Tony bought a church in Nashville, Music Row. It's now Ocean Way Studios. And the story goes, he took Susan's body there and kept it in the freezer on the first floor.
Hmm.
So I started talking to some of these technicians, people who work at that studio. They seen a lady, a little skinny, petite blonde lady walking around at night, which matches the description of Susan Alamo.
Wow.
So that's West Nashville. You have the Tony Alamo stove, and there's a lot more to Tony Alamo. I could spend all day talking about him, but yeah, he was a pedophile. He had like teenage brides. He had brides like 7, 8 years old. He was a
Jeez.
rotten, horrible guy.
Hmm.
But there's a ghost story in there somewhere, and I found it.
Right. Now, so you split Nashville kind of in two. So how did like Hendersonville and Brentwood come about?
Well, when I wrote the Franklin book, everybody kept telling me, you should write a Brentwood book, write a Brentwood book. Like it's just easy to do. But Brentwood, you got to think Franklin, it was the county seat, it was the town square. Brentwood was just farmland. It was, you go back in old newspapers, it's called the Brentwood Hills. There wasn't nothing there but a bunch of farms. But there's a lot of hauntings in Brentwood, and I've kind of uncovered a bunch of them. There's some really horrible murders and some. I think they said Brentwood. There's more graveyards in Brentwood per capita than any other city in Tennessee.
Huh.
But Hendersonville, it's like Gallatin. Oh, write a book on Gallatin because it's right there next to it. And Hendersonville, whereas Gallatin, it's like Civil War, it's fires, cholera. Hendersonville, it's a lot of Native American stuff. It's right there on the Cumberland River and all those
Mm-hmm.
creeks run through Hendersonville. I mean, you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Rock Castle. There's a graveyard over behind a grocery store that there's just so much stuff in Hendersonville. Twitty City, it's haunted. It's not. It's now called what is it? Trinity Music Studio, Trinity Music Broadcasting, or something.
Right.
Yeah, it's just these neighboring cities next to other cities I've done. I just collect stories and I go talking to people. And I used to work in Hendersonville for a long time, and I'd hear stuff and people can find me and tell me things. I just make
Right.
notes.
Yeah, my wife works at the Hendersonville Hospital. She works in Building C, and she's told me a couple of creepy things that she's seen herself just in the years she's worked there. And one of her bosses has showed her this video clip of like a walkthrough they were doing of something to kind of show people how they did the job there, and just this weird stuff was showing up in the video, and all these weird uh people talking. It was like just her in the building when she was filming this, and it was just really weird. And like my wife, she said one morning they had got there, it was just her and another coworker there, and she's kind of glanced down the hallway and she's seen like the tail of a doctor's coat go into one of the rooms, and she thought the doctor was already there,
Yeah.
and she went into the room and there's nobody there, and there's just a window in there. So unless he jumped out the window and closed it behind him, she's like, okay, there's nobody in here. And so she told me that, and I was like, that's really interesting. And I want to go in there and investigate, but I don't think her boss would allow it. So
Well, yeah, isn't it Vanderbilt?
no, it's Hendersonville Hospital.
Okay. Well, there's in there a creek back there behind there.
Ah,
I mean,
I,
yeah, hospitals. There's hauntings in hospitals. I think there's like
yeah,
creeks in Hendersonville, and I think it's just old Indian land.
right. Yeah, Hendersonville. Because you got the lakes out there and everything too. So it's I love Hendersonville, and it's just
Hmm.
now. What are all the different hotels in your haunted hotels book?
And that's just something I kind of. That's like the first. That's like the second book I did. My wife, I did it because we were traveling, and I just took note. Went to, Union Stations in there. This was it called the place in Atlanta was the largest fire in the history of the United States happened. The Wine Cough Hotel.
Hmm.
Like they were just throwing babies out the window. It was
Oh
just a
man.
horrible, horrible event. Yeah, just.
Oh,
But I mean, there's a lot of ghost stories from that.
that's that's terrible. Now I know you do. You do the paranormal events and stuff, helping out with these different locations, and you do some conventions as well too. And I know last year you was at a pretty good one in Lebanon, and then you're going to be one of the guest speakers at one coming up here in October that our good friends Lee and Eric and Regina's putting on. So
Yeah, they got me speaking first, man. It's like it's a lot of pressure. It's
I seen their little their list they released the other day, and I was like, man, Alan's up first, like 9 o'clock in the
I'm
morning.
gonna set the bar really low for everybody.
So so how did you initially meet like Eric and Lee and those guys?
Well, it's funny. Eric started his podcast, and I think I was the first guest he ever had.
Oh, really? Well, see, that's funny because Eric was my first guest.
Yeah, so yeah, we just kind of stayed in touch, and he's talked to me. I've been on several different shows. We did a live show back in October. That was a lot of fun, and Eric's a great guy. Lee's a lot of fun, and uh, I mean, I see him around all the time. I want to help. They're always nice to me. I want to help them, and
Right.
I mean, I mean, in this business, there's a lot of people kind of cutthroat. You just gotta
Hmm.
help people who help you, and just try to help out where you can.
Absolutely. Now, if somebody wanted to buy one or all of your books, where can people buy your books at?
Amazon.com is probably the easiest. I mean, Barnes and Noble. Some stores have different ones. I'm not sure how it's all set up. I've been to one store and they have one or two, and I go to one down the street and they have none of them. So Barnes and Noble, talk to your manager there. I don't really know, or
Right.
BarnesandNoble.com or
Right.
Amazon.com is probably the easiest.
Right. Now, I was fixing to ask you if somebody wanted to go out and buy one tomorrow. Where are some places that you know that they could go buy one tomorrow?
Well, Amazon.com is the easiest. I mean, Pickled Treats has most of them. I think Lowe's House has one. Um, different places carry different ones, so it's hard to
Right. Right.
unless you go to Pickled Treats, you probably have a hard time finding all of it at the same place.
Right. Now, if people want to kind of keep up with your updates and stuff, do you have a website, any social media sites that people can follow along?
But yeah, but I'm terrible at it. Go to Facebook on Southern Ghost Stories, or I started the group Tennessee Hauntings. When I started that group, it grew really fast. I was posting stories every couple of days and putting original content. Now I'm knee deep in all these books, and I'm concentrating on writing books and less Facebook content. But I got a plan to get back on there and start posting more on Facebook. But yeah, Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram, and then the Tennessee Hauntings on Facebook. We're always on there doing stuff.
All right. Yeah, I think that Tennessee Haunting, it's got, God, what, over probably about 10,000 members in there?
I think it's like 16 or 17.
Yeah, I think it's quite a bit. So, and
Yeah, when I started it, like it grew. It had like it went from 0 to 10,000, like that. But I was posting original, fresh content all the time.
right. And you know, the paranormal right now is a big hot commodity. So pretty much anything paranormal that people are interested in, they're going to start following it just to kind of check it out. So, and I've tried starting a couple of different little pages like that on Facebook, and I just don't have time to keep up with it. So they just
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
hard, man. I mean, I've got a little boy too, and it's just
right,
trying to juggle writing books and being a father, and I have my wife want to chop my head off because I'm never spending time with her. I gotta find a way to balance all this stuff.
right. Now you said your new books come out this summer. Do you have like an actual date yet, or is that still kind of pending?
Well, I'm a big nerd, so what I wanted to do, this is like in my head, it's a grand idea. Growing up when I was a kid, I think it was September 13, 1993, Guns N' Roses released Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 on that day.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, September 13th, I'm going to release all my books like Use Your Illusion, but I'm not as cool as Guns N' Roses. So if I release them in August or something, but yeah, I'll do a big drop. I thought about doing one or two in like April or May and doing the rest in the summer, but I'll probably just do one big drop and be done with it.
Okay, so how many do you like actually you got coming out here soon?
There are three that I can tell you about, and I'll tell you there's more than that coming, but I'm trying to kind of keep that close to the vest.
I got you. I got you. So, all right, well, everybody, this is Allen Sircy, author of Southern Ghost Stories. Got the thumbs up. I got the name right, I guess, right? All right. Well, everybody, go check out Allen's books. I haven't got any myself. I need to at least get one to support this guy, and actually sit down and read it when I actually have time to sit down and read it. As Allen said, being into the paranormal and having an actual job is it's like having two or three full-time jobs.
Hmm.
So, everybody, give Allen a follow on his social medias, Southern Ghost Stories. Check out his books. If you don't want to wait and have them delivered, go to the Spooky Pickle in Gallatin, and you can probably get most of them there. So, Alan,
And Shauna will tell you the ghost stories up there. Go see her.
hell yeah. So that's how you do it. I know I've talked to her a couple times about coming out there and investigating. So that's something we have on the books for some point. Because I
Yeah,
know,
and she'll rent the building out. If you or your team want to go up there, she'll rent it to you for a reasonable price.
yeah, I've talked to her a couple of times. So that's something that's on the books too. I've thought about trying to hit up Rosemont and then about halfway through the night go across the road and do that, or kind of half and half my team in
Yeah.
Rosemont, half over there, and just kind of swap and see, just kind of see if we have the same experiences and not talk about it until afterwards. So
Hmm.
But all right, well, Alan, I really appreciate you coming on, man, and everybody go buy his books, support this guy.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right, have a good one.